The Portland Trailblazers are for sale, and the Blazers had a downer overnight at the draft lottery. What to make of it all? We'll do our best here on the Blazer Focus podcast. I am Aaron Fentress of the Oregonian and Oregon Live, joined by Craig Birnbach. Craig, you know, I'm trying to get myself up this morning. I was up, but half up, and gonna write my second day story responding to the lottery, which didn't go so well for the Blazers. They fell from 10 to 11. And all of a sudden, boom, there's this announcement that the franchise is for sale. That Paul Allen's estate, after all of these years, he passed away in 2018. The estate, which is being run by his sister Jody Allen, is supposed to sell off all his assets. The Blazers and the Seahawks have been dangling out there for a while, with the idea being that why sell them right away when they're going to continue to appreciate and value, which they have, smart move. But now, out of nowhere, like literally, boom, they're for sale. So I'm thinking, you and me, bro, like, we can come up with a few bill, right? No? Maybe bring in...
I'll trade in my Tiguan, my VW Tiguan, my big-time car. We'll see what we can do.
I got a rental property I can dump. You know, we can throw that in there, you know. Anyway.
You're ahead of me.
So, dude, wow. And
about time.
It's
he's, by the way,
because it literally came out of nowhere.
Speechless, which is like never. That never happens. He's like, can't get it out. I look, you know what I've said every podcast. I was going to mention the fact that we're not going anywhere until there's an ownership change. Like, you're not, as a fan, like, you're just stuck in this place where you have zero idea who's invested in winning, who's invested in making sure the team is run smoothly, who cares, who doesn't care. And now you know it's soon, not tomorrow, maybe not for a year, but you're going to have a new owner. And whether it's Phil Knight or it's anyone, I know there's things can always get worse. Like, I'm not one of those people that often says that it can only get better. But in this situation, I'd at least rather have an owner I hate, like, than a trust. You know, like, at least you have that. Also, the other part is philanthropical organizations are going to benefit from this. Billions of dollars is going to go to, good causes, and we definitely need that kind of thing right now. So to me, yesterday, very bad day if you're a Trailblazer fan. No way. Look, and people can try to lipstick that pig all day. No, it was bad.
There are players at 11 just as good as the players you could have gotten at 5 or 6 or 7, just in case you didn't know.
Or 1, 2, 3, or 4. That's the issue. You didn't land at 1, 2, 3, or 4.
I don't think anyone's going to claim that lie, but yeah, go ahead.
I'm just saying, like, yes, it's bad. Yeah. And we'll get into that, all for 3 wins. But anyway, today is a good day if you're a Blazer fan, because since 2018, you've been in this limbo of being convinced that somehow a person who doesn't really own the team, who never cared about the team before, who has never spoken out loud in front of a microphone to the fan base, cared about your team and was doing all the right things. And
okay, I can't say she didn't care, because she came to a lot of games, even when they were bad.
I'm not saying she didn't, but you've never been convinced. She didn't tell you, and she didn't own the team. I mean, that's the thing. She's not the owner. It's a trust. Now, was it even in the best interest to win? I mean, to many people would say, and there's an argument to say the best thing to do was clear the books, get as much debt off as you can, including contracts, and not take on contracts, so that the team is worth more to sell, which that is honorable, because that money's going to charity, not to her. So, like, that respect for that, to make sure that the team is as valuable as possible. I've often said that keeping anything of value that's always increased in value, like, eventually you're going to have to sell. Like, what's the right time? People are like, well, it's going to be worth more. I'm like, NBA franchises are not losing money like that, as far as being worth. So I say, great. I'm excited to see what happens. I'm excited to get a new owner. Paul Allen was a great owner. I mean,
Right.
whoever's going to be the next owner, I don't know if they can be as good as Paul Allen. I mean, and of course, there's always going to be the fear of what is their Portland connection going to be. So I'm not going to sit here and say this couldn't turn out to be the worst thing in the world, but it was going to happen eventually. So let's go. And now I'm just hopeful that we can, we could see a great ownership group, an owner that cares about Portland, cares about the Trailblazers, cares about winning.
Okay, so clearly there's two major things here, right? So one, I think by far, is that people are going to wonder, could someone come in and move the team? And then, of course, secondary is the basketball side to me, because if the franchise could be moved, then nothing else that happens with the basketball team matters. But the next thing is, what does this mean for staff? Cronin just got an extension. Billups just got an extension. A new owner could be likely to say, I want to hire a whole new staff, including GM, and that GM might want to hire their own coach, right? So that's an interesting situation. And what does that mean for this upcoming season in the summer, in terms of what moves they can make? Like, can they make a big trade? Can they make major signings or monumental moves or anything like that without, obviously, have to clear it through Allen anyway, but you got to clear it through her, because those things might affect, the sale. It could be affected in a good way or affected in the bad way. But let's just talk about, the danger of the team moving. I mean, at this point, the only thing they can really do is, I don't even know if it's possible. Do you add a clause into the sale that you cannot move the team? I don't think you
Those
can
have
do
been
that.
done before, and somehow they don't hold.
Right. And so, because you think you can find another reason. So this, this isn't a situation like in Seattle where you didn't have an arena that was worthy of an NBA franchise. If the Blazers were still playing in Memorial, then you'd have that issue. You have the Moda Center, which is definitely a worthy arena still. It needs to be updated, but that's in the process of being done. So that's another thing. What happens with all that? But like, are you someone who thinks to themselves, this could happen, they could be moved? Or is that like just something that's a 0.001% chance of happening? Like about the odds of you and I coming up with the money to buy the team?
It's definitely not that far-fetched. So no, I think that, first of all, I would think that Jody Allen and and the trust and the NBA would be, hopefully, we'll see, vetting this as part of it, saying that they want to sell to someone that wants it to keep it in Portland. It doesn't make a lot of sense for the NBA to want Portland to move when they're about to put a team back in Seattle. It just doesn't make any sense, because the travel for the Pacific Northwest teams are so difficult. People put up those mileage all the time, and Seattle's been out here kind of on its own. And now you're suddenly going to put two teams, which it's not just about two teams, what that does for Portland and Seattle. It's what it does for the East Coast teams. When they have a swing, they get two games instead of one, with only, with that long flight. So it's a weird time for the NBA to support a move when we know expansion and is on the doorstep with Seattle right there. I have a little fear, because I don't trust, billionaire owners who know they can do whatever they want, and obviously Seattle didn't. There was times when they were given promises that team wasn't going to move. Now, of course, we all knew where he was from. We knew it was that wasn't a huge shock. So the hope is that the sale will be to somebody. I mean, I threw Phil Knight out there, obviously, first, because that seems like the dream scenario, that Phil Knight or the Knight family or a Nike related option, just because, or an Oregon related owner would buy them. And then that would relieve that stress. But no, I think that if you're Portland, you're always going to have that little bit of a fear, because you have one of the big four. I mean, obviously now, but it also helps that you're getting a WNBA team as well. I think that the ingredients for a move aren't here, as far as to help the NBA, Associated League, in the WNBA. That wouldn't be what the NBA and WNBA would want. So you would think they have this opportunity to weigh in on the ownership, and you would hope that part of the trust thing is to sell it to someone who wants to stay here, and that would be their goal. So I would never remove. You need the fear because you want people to be watching out for that. You don't want what happened in with Seattle, where a guy from Oklahoma City comes in and says, "No, I'm not going to move him," and everyone's like, wait a minute," and then they move him, right? And the arena issue and all that, but they're not. These are not. This is apples and oranges, but it's still fruit. So you still got to be, it could happen, right? So you got to be careful.
So let's circle back to Knight. So Knight reportedly made an offer of $2.3 billion in 2022 that Jody Allen turned down, said the franchise wasn't for sale. I screamed to high heavens at the time that Phil Knight should just overpaid, should just offer $3.5 billion, just say, here, let's get this done, just to own it. He was 84 at the time. He's 87 now. Overpay for it. There's only 30 of them. This one's for sale. You want this one. It's in your backyard. You can do a lot of great things with it and around it. If you overpay, who cares? Because, it's all going to charity. I even was thinking, hell, pay 2.5 and then donate $1 billion to the charity. And you can write that off, right?
Right. Whatever it is.
Right. So anyway, now we're 3 years later. CNBC values the Blazers. They had a report earlier this year where they gave a valuation for each franchise. They had the Blazers at 22nd at $3.65 billion, which is what I thought Phil should have paid 3 years ago. See, he made his money back already. But do you think, with him being 87, with the team being up for sale, A, do you think he could make a run at it, or B, do you think he should? And before you answer, I just had this conversation with someone else, and they brought up his age. And I'm like, okay, he had a business partner last time. I can't remember the guy's name, but it was someone I think associated with the Dodgers, maybe.
Owner, yep.
Yeah, who's going to be involved in it. So if you do that, it's not a situation I think where, I hate to be morbid, but after Phil Knight passes, that you're right back where you were before with this because you have a co-owner. But to me, the best case scenario is that Phil Knight is involved with this, and that Phil Knight does, in whatever years he has left, for the Rose Quarter, what he did for Oregon. Just go nuts, build a new arena, or just completely revamp the one you got, build up the quarter, do a lot of cool things in and around the franchise to make it something that's, a beacon for the rest of the league that sort of ups your ante in terms of getting free agents to come to Portland, which is what he did for Oregon in terms of helping them raise their profile and their image to make recruiting a whole lot easier when they went out to LA, when they went out to the East Coast, when they went down to Texas and Florida, what have you. So anyway, maybe that's all fantasy at this point, but that's the way I would want to see this thing go.
Ditto. I mean, I don't see what the argument is. Yes, there has to be an 87-year-old is not going to buy a team without a succession plan of some sort. Right. I mean, he's not. It's Phil Knight. He's one of the smartest businessmen in Oregon history, if not the most successful.
World history, right?
Yeah. Right. I mean, I'm just saying, like, this guy's not going to be like, I'm going to buy it at 87, but no plans for the future.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, like,
they go right back into a trust.
Right. I mean, I don't see that as a thing that he would do because he wouldn't want that. And part of the reason why he wants to buy them is because he wants them to stay here. I mean, he's from Portland. This is probably the only, if he wanted another NBA team, he could have had it a long time ago. Now, he might have had to transition out of Nike and stuff, but I mean, he could have made that decision when he was 70, So, yes, to me, it's the best case scenario that his name's on it for as long as possible. And whether it's, one of his sons that, is involved, or what was last time, which was a part owner, a guy who was a owner of the Dodgers, who's also, a gamillionaire. But yes, to me, a person that is invested in Oregon, who's invested in the Portland metro area, who wants, who has ideas and will spend money and is doing this partly, I don't want to say fun, but like the reason why Paul Allen fluctuated when he cared about business and when he didn't, because he wasn't even trying to make more money. It just, his money made money, like you couldn't help it. He was one of the richest people in the world, but he didn't get into other technically businesses. He's pretty much retired from everyday work and did what he did. And Phil Knight's 87 years old, and he's not looking to double his, his estate
portfolio,
per se, or, so whatever money he spends is going to be to win. And that's important. We know that. It doesn't always work. owners that spend money can screw up, but let's go, let's try it. And of course, it's the only name we know, right? I mean, it's not like you're as tight as you can be to cover in this franchise, but you're not that tight in the billionaire. You're not hanging out in the billionaire social clubs that last time I checked. So it's not like you're like, oh, this is the 3 names that I've heard that can potentially, make a bid, but we'll find that out soon enough because, that's what's going to happen. But again, it was inevitable. I'm glad it's done while Phil Knight's, hopefully still interested. But we'll find out. The one thing about Phil Knight is he lets his interest known. You know what I mean? He let it out there in the ether that he tried to buy them. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
That didn't sneak out past him. He was with that. So, that's, to me, it's exciting of the potential with a little bit of fear.
True. One thing I'll mention. So in the last year or so, the Blazers were working with the Portland City Council on a plan to renovate the Moda Center and the surrounding remodel and basically improve the Rose Quarter. And in that agreement, they had two 5-year bridge agreements to extend the current lease at Moda to give them time to, go through the process of making improvements and work out a new long-term lease. That lease agreement, which the first one is 5 years, is baked into, it would be baked into a sale. Like that's they made that point during the whole process. The Blazers did that. If the team were sold, this agreement would remain in place. So someone couldn't just buy it and just bail. Now, I mean,
you can buy your way out of anything.
Yeah, exactly. Right. It's one of those things where it's like, if you break the lease, what exactly is going to happen to you that you can't afford to handle if you're willing to buy a team for billions of dollars, right? But still, that was put in there to try and make it clear that Jody Allen wanted to see the Blazers remain in Portland, and they wanted to work things out. But they also made it clear that, we need to make some fixes here because this arena is no longer sustainable. And that's what happened in Seattle. Now, Seattle's arena was like on par with, maybe a little better than the Coliseum. No NBA team would maintain residency in the Coliseum. But, the Moda Center needs to be upgraded, et cetera. But it's not an arena where you point at and go, yeah, we can't operate here at all.
Right. No one goes in there and goes, this place is a dump.
Huh?
No one goes in there and says this place is a dump.
Right, exactly. But if you go into the Intuit, is that what's called, Intuit, right? The Clippers?
The Clippers. If you go to the Clippers, you go to the Clippers arena, you think you're in 2020,
Intuit Stadium,
2050.
They call it a stadium. They don't even call it an arena. They call it a stadium. Right. But that place is gorgeous. Yes. But of course, I think I joked at the time they should just tear down the Moda Center and try to replicate that. But anyway, my point is that you have a legitimate arena that needs an upgrade, and it's not something where I think someone can come in and say, we're going to bail on you right away if you don't upgrade this. But 5 years out, they could, if things aren't being done to upgrade it and the city's not involved in that. So that to me is still a danger. I just don't believe that the NBA is going to really allow it. Like you said, it doesn't make much sense. So I'm going to just lean on the side of being 99.999% sure that that's not a thing. What is a thing, however, is what happens with the Blazers staff.
Absolutely.
They just signed Cronin to an extension. They just signed Billups to the whole timing of this is just fascinating to me. Like,
right,
basically
they had to know they were doing this and they made these extensions.
Right. And they put pressure on Cronin and Billups to do better.
Yep.
Which took them out of the running, realistic running for the top pick, which we'll get to in a little bit. And then give those guys extensions for doing well. So you rewarded them and then you put the team up for sale. So, was rewarding them a way of saying, okay, we're going to sell the team, but you guys did a good job. So here's a security blanket for you because you're going to get paid either way. Or unless you take another job, obviously, that offset. But the whole thing is just fascinating because
or is it?
Why would you meddle that much? And then if you're planning on selling, I don't know, whatever. But what do you think this means for staff, though? Go ahead.
I think they don't know. I think they're in flux and waiting because the other thing that this did is if you if you hired a new GM and you hired a new coach, there's a chance they would have made more money than the current coach and GM, especially if you hire one with a lot of experience. You know what I mean? Like, so for me, this was another step to say, here to the new owners, they're 3-year extensions. So let's be honest, the new owner, the first year is not going to be on them. I mean, odds are they'll get them with 1 year left on contracts. Right? Don't you think the best case scenario? No, but I mean, realistically, next year is going to be taken care of. And will they transition the year after? You know, when is that? I'm just saying it's the most is 2 years on the contract, and maybe even a year and a half, maybe a year, depending on how fast the sales don't go through in 10 minutes, as we well know, even once you have the deal. Look at Minnesota. They were sold, unsold, sold, unsold, sold again. Like, I mean, it didn't happen. They're still going through that. So, and also those contracts are not going to be, there'll be more. There was no reason. It seems to me that was the easier route, was to re-sign your current people for 3 years, knowing that you were going to put the team up for sale and not going to hire, a GM. I don't know where the GM money is, but I can't imagine Joe Cronin's in the top 10, you know what I mean, based on where the NBA is. And Billups has a nice contract, but not new top, not championship level coaching money, you know what I mean, where you might have to bring it in. So to me, that made the most sense, was to say, hey, let's not go and get people and have to put them under 4 or 5 year contracts or with new contracts. And also knowing that agents and the candidates were going to be asking about that. And they weren't going to lie. You can't do that. You can't lie to NBA talent-free agents, because that'll burn you in the long run. So they have to say, no, we're going to put the team up. So maybe that's harder to get people. How many top-level coaches, you already talked about it, where they were now, not talking about the fact that they're selling the team, and, who is going to take this job knowing that there's going to be a new owner? A lot harder. Chauncey Billups, Joe Cronin, I would hope that they were in the loop and knew that it was going to happen, and they were willing to accept that. So, and heck, if you're them, why not? Like, okay, now I got a chance. If we're winning, they're not going to come in and fire us. If we're on the up, if we get Cooper flagged by accident with less than 3%, oh wait, Dallas got that. But you know what I'm saying? Like, there's opportunities here to be in a place where you're unfireable. And what better place to be now and that in 2 years, if next year you do make the playoffs and you find a star or something like that. But yeah, the more interesting parts are going to be what moves can you make and how do you clear that? And what is the goal? Is the goal to get it down to just get rid of Grant's contract, to get rid of Simon's contract, just to get the new owners as much flexibility as possible? Because that makes a lot of sense. You know what I mean? Like, as far as having the most money, or is it to get the most talent so that the new owners feel good? I don't know. Those are the interesting parts.
I would think you want the moves to be done that are going to make the team better.
Makes sense.
I don't think if they started trying to, because if you start trying to just dump contracts and clear salary, if I'm Cronin, why? Like, what does that do for me in my career? If now I went through tanking and now I'm going through tearing down what I was building without the idea of trying to be, I don't know, it just doesn't make any sense to me. But clearly, everyone's on the hot seat right now, man. Like, there's just no way around it. You never know what a new owner is going to do. And history has shown us in all situations, whether it's a new GM or a new owner, that eventually, if it's not right away, they're going to try and one of the things they want to do is hire their own guy, which, I give credit to Cronin for sticking with Billups. I mean, they kind of came in together, so that makes sense. But usually that's not what happens. So they, in the next year, they need to show progress. Like, they need to be a contender for the playoffs, or if they don't get into the play-in, I could definitely see completely cleaning house and they just pay them off And if they get other jobs and it offsets it, and you just, you spend $4 billion for a franchise, what's buying out $15 million in contracts, right?
Absolutely.
It's nothing.
And as a matter of fact, they might be, doing the math on that while buying them. They put that in the budget and say, hey, we have to, this is what the expectation is for, worst case scenario or whatever you want to call that, this scenario. I mean, these people have multiple scenarios and budgets when they do these things. So scenario one is we keep these and boom, and we have this. Scenario two is that we will have to pay out these two contracts. And then this is what we expect to pay for new people. I mean, but that said, they do have the opportunity. I mean, to try to do two things. One, keep their current job. Two, get their next job. You know what I mean? Like Chauncey Billups, we've already talked about the fact that we were pretty sure Chauncey Billups was not going to, be on the unemployment line for very long, even if he wanted to be a head coach. Joe Cronin, look, he has a chance to continue in a direction that either stays at the GM position here or possibly gets another GM position, or at least, falls in line with another organization at a high level. I mean, he's already proven the reason why he was the interim GM is because all the work he did, as an assistant GM role. So, look, to me, unless something crazy happened and they weren't told at all, which is wild, that I can't imagine that happened. And also, you and I and everyone around knew it was a trust, right? Like, so this isn't a shock to them. So I'm not feeling bad for them. They accepted jobs under these circumstances, knowing that, probably knowing the team is going to be for sale this year. And so, and they can go prove themselves and live really well and have one of the rare jobs of NBA head coach and NBA general manager. And if they do really well, they'll probably keep their jobs.
Right. Exactly. All right. So speaking of the direction of the basketball team, which, is always more interesting than me. It's always the basketball stuff is always more interesting to me than all the business.
That's why we care, right?
Real quick though, Celtics sold for $6.1 billion. Suns, less than a year after the Blazers turned down Phil Knight's offer, sold for $4.0 billion. And then right after that, or right before that, the Bucks went for 3.5. Dallas went for 3.5, and the Hornets went for $3 billion. So, what do you think?
Yeah,
3.2.
I would say
3.3.
I would say between 3 and 4 billion. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I think the low. I expect them to be more than the Hornets, but look,
plus
Charlotte's
plus the arena is subpar. I mean, it's not we got to move right away subpar. It's low end of the it's what 30 something years old.
It's not brand new, and it's not a selling point, and you don't technically own the land, or whatever that is, So,
right.
I can't imagine it going for less than $3 billion because no franchise, they usually go for more, but 3 to 4 billion. I think that's where we're at, So, but it only takes one person to want it more. Like that's the thing, with these people, they can be competitive. If there's one bidder, it goes for $3 billion. If there's two bidders, it goes 3 for 5, 3 bidders, $4 billion.
100%. I don't even understand
that's how it works.
How overpay comes into these conversations. Remember Ballmer was criticized for paying $2 billion for the Clippers?
Yeah.
Remember that? You overpaid for it? At the time, I could not believe people were saying, like, what are you talking about? He paid what he needed to pay to get it. You just get it. It doesn't matter to someone like that if he overpaid by $600 million. That's couch cushion money for someone like that, right? And what's it worth now? What's it worth now?
More.
Way more.
What's he worth?
Whether he overpaid or not, it's still worth more. That's why I always joke. If I were worth $30 or $40 billion and the Chicago Bears were valued at 6, I walk in tomorrow and offer 10. And people will tell me I'm crazy, and that's fine. Call me crazy while I'm walking around in a Chicago Bears suit at the Bears game, doing whatever I want.
Right, because you can't take it with you. I mean,
cannot take it with you. So what if I overpay by $4 billion? Who cares? I still got $20 billion in the bank or assets, and I own the Bears. So Yes, you're right. 100%. Okay, we had a little mic issue because I smacked my mic accidentally. It went out.
You did.
So
You got
start
hyped.
over.
You want to buy the Bears.
Got all fired up. All right. So the lottery. Now look, I didn't have much hope they were going to win. I had my story pre-written that they were going to finish 10th. I did some research on players. It could be like 7 players that could be available at 10, 11 in there, had those bios written up. Now, if they had gotten the top 4, I had to scrap those and redo some other ones. I didn't even bother about it. It's just like, you know what? This is what's going to happen. But still, it's a buzzkill.
Oh, it's bad. It's bad.
And it was back-to-back for me, too, because I'm a Bulls fan. So they got to 12. I'm like, no Bulls. The Chicago Bulls. Damn. Okay, no Blazers. The Portland Trailblazers. Damn, are you kidding me? And then it's over. The dream is over. Nothing else is going to happen. It's done. And yeah, I'm a Bulls fan. I cover the Blazers. I want to see the Blazers do well.
Of course.
It's more fun when they're winning.
Of course.
To cover a team. Like, it just is. I've covered a couple Super Bowls with Seahawks. I covered some national championship game runs with the Ducks. That's fun. Covering lottery season is not as much fun. So, yeah, I was pulling for the Blazers to win the lottery. They did not. They fell back a spot for the 3rd time in 4 years, by the way. So, on one hand, it's like you can't really be too bothered by it because you kind of saw it coming. It was going to happen mathematically. Probability was there. But at the same time, it's still a buzzkill, especially, Craig.
Oh, yeah.
Especially when San Antonio jumps to 2.
3 wins.
And Dallas with a 1.7% chance, the Blazers had a 3.7% chance at 1, jumps up to number 1. So you got 2 teams in the West that are already better than you. Now, Dallas is shaky because we don't know what's going to happen with Kyrie's knee and Anthony Davis.
They're not as shaky today.
I'm just saying, but if those 2 are healthy and you add Cooper Flagg to that,
oh gosh,
they're going to be dynamic. However, the odds are one or both are not going to necessarily be healthy for very long, but they can pivot to an elite player, maybe. We'll see how he pans out. So the point here is that the already stacked West, where long-term you still have to deal with Minnesota and Edwards, OKC and Houston, San Antonio, which is going to add another player to Wemby.
And they got 2 first-round draft picks.
Yeah, and even Memphis with Morant and Jaren Jackson. And now Dallas is going to have Cooper Flagg. It's mind-boggling to think about how much heavy lifting has to happen, that most of it's probably impossible for the Blazers to ever contend in the West in the next 10 years. Like, unless they get blindly lucky on something, like if at 11 they draft the next Tyrese Halliburton or Giannis, who went 15th, or Booker, who I think went 14th.
Or well, they don't have a 2nd-round pick, so they can't.
2nd-round Jokic or something. Yeah, exactly. But, I mean, those things can happen.
Jalen Brunson.
Yeah, but just in terms
Green.
of mathematical probability, unless Sharp, Scoot, and Klingon all become star-level players, you're going to be chasing these other franchises into the foreseeable future. Now, the only thing that I would say that looks pretty promising, though, is that Giannis is already having talks about maybe leaving Milwaukee. So if Giannis leaves Milwaukee in a deal that gets the Bucks some draft picks, but not necessarily high-end talent to keep them relevant, then they're going to fall. If they fall, then that 2029 draft pick that you own of the Bucks and the swaps you have from 28 and 30 all came in the Damian Lillard trades, those become valuable. So then maybe you can flip those in some types of packages for some of these contracts that you have that you want to move. And you're able to go out and get in the running to get a star on the move. Someone like if Booker becomes available, or what, I don't think they're getting at Giannis because I don't think Giannis will come anywhere near Portland.
No.
But then you can maybe get a star that way and have a chance. But man, that was ugly watching those 2 teams jump up like that.
Yeah, the thing that popped out at me was the fact that, before Wemby's injury, there was no chance the Spurs were going to finish below the Blazers. You know what I mean? Like, right. It just wasn't. And then they got Fox. There was no chance they were going to.
No chance.
And then he got the blood clot, and they shut him down. And then they shut Fox down.
Yeah.
Because they were like, let's go for it again, as far as the lottery. And because of 3 wins total, the Blazers swap places, and the Spurs have the number 2 overall pick. and the Blazers have the 11th. Like, it's just, and all this for what? For what? Like, lose 3 more games and shut it down. I mean, they tried to win and to get in a play-in that they didn't get in, and if they did, they would have lost. I mean, like, it's the frustrating part of the weirdness of being a lower level team, because at some point you have to try to win, but this to me wasn't the year to do it. This was not it, and especially considering you weren't going to anyway. So you finish basically in the same place as the Spurs, meaning not in the play-in, and because of those 3 victories, and of course this is all, I'm just saying the spots are the spots, right? So right. The Spurs would have been flip-flopped, and the Blazers would be number 2. Stop hitting your mic, dude. You're killing it.
Sorry.
So that's the frustrating part to me, is that this lack of direction for the season itself caused problems. And in the end, it does say this, though, that banking on picks is not always the best thing, because the worst team, because the other side of the coin is, well, at least we're not the Wizards, right? Like, at least we didn't tank like crazy and not get in the top 3 and have a miserable season and not end up in the top 3. I mean, at least we're not the worst team in the league that didn't get in the top 3, because the lottery has worked in the sense that the team with the worst record for, what is it? Is it 5 straight years now? Have not gotten the top pick. And people are like, now suddenly I see people saying, well, the lottery doesn't work. I'm like, that was the point of the lottery, like, to change it so that you didn't tank. You know what I mean? Right. Like, because it didn't always end up with the best pick. And look, at the Mavs, it just shows that, like, to me, this is proof that it's not rigged. Like, because to me, why would the NBA rig it for this purpose, to give it the Mavs? Like, right. It just, because it's like too obvious of a rig, like, sometimes things are too obvious.
Yeah,
they're not rigged. It's
people
not
are calling rigged. But people are calling the conspiracy and everything. Well, right. Kyrie Irving's knee in on the conspiracy,
right?
Kyrie doesn't get hurt,
and getting totally death threats part of it. Like, no.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a depressing day to move back to 11. I understand why Joe Cronin has to say that they're comfortable where they are, but no, you're not. You're not happy with those results. I mean, not even to land in the spot that you earned, which is 10, and to move back. And sometimes that's a big deal. Like, people are like, it's only one spot. Yeah, it's one spot. That's one player. And you only play 5 at a time. So it's a big deal. Because if it ends up being, the difference, and we can go forever and ever on somebody picked, 10th instead of 11th, or 9th instead of 10th, or 8th, it's the worst, pretty much the worst case scenario.
And Houston's picking ahead of you because they have the Phoenix Suns pick. So here's the thing about the lottery. So they reduced it from 25% for the worst team, and they eventually made it where the worst 3 get 14% each. 14% it's not a guarantee. It's nice, but it's not great, because if you look at the bottom teams, so the teams with the worst odds as a group, if you go 7.5 on down, you're looking at like 18%. So mathematically, one of those teams has a higher % chance of getting it than any single one of the worst 3. But there's 3 of them, though. And even still, though, they only make up 42%. That means there's a 58% chance that the winner of the number 1 pick is not going to be one of those bottom 3. I think the system's working. I think some people are complaining, saying, oh, well, you rewarded this team, that team got, well, you know what? Such is life. What are you going to do? Because you're trying to make teams not be so blatant about it. That said, Washington got the 2nd pick last year, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so that worked out. I mean, you can't bank on 1. They got 2nd last year. They're still 6th. If I'm the Blazers, I'd rather be 5th or 6th than 11th.
Of course.
That's the thing for me, is like getting that top 6, 7,
I'm just trying to top 4. The Wizards, they tanked their entire season. No one showed up. No one watched. Business-wise, it's horrible. The Blazers did give their fans a month. you know, like, and
Right.
the crowds did come back. Now, in hindsight, I think it was dumb, you know, like, because the goal is to win championships, and not it shouldn't be about getting, 12 attendance better on 12 games out of the history of your franchise. But I mean, if you're selling the team, like, that's where we're at with that. But yes, obviously you'd rather have 6 than 11. I mean, and you'd rather have 2. You'd rather have 2. Like that's the one that sticks out to me. The Spurs got 2 because they tanked when they lost Wemby and they sat Fox with an injury that he probably would have played through. I mean, it just stinks to end up moving back. I mean, you moved back. Like, there's nothing good about that. Like, back is bad. Forward is good. Like,
so, but at the same time, we have to give credit to the Blazers and the Bulls for demonstrating competitive integrity. There is something to be said. Like, we can sit there and say they shouldn't, but at the same time, what they did do, although we can say wasn't smart in terms of rebuilding your franchise, the error was, that they demonstrated some competitive integrity, which is what we want all teams to have. It's sort of it's really a contradictory situation in a lot of different ways. So I'm not gonna bash them necessarily, but at the same time, man, the Trailblazers are up against it because they're not going to go out and get a marquee free agent. They're not going to be able to pull off some amazing trade for some legitimate difference maker. They can probably get a Zach LaVine, who's a really good player, but it's not a difference maker in terms of becoming a contender.
Yeah.
But the odds of them going out and trading for someone who's a championship difference maker, who's going to want to stay in Portland long term, it's just astronomical. Like, you got to draft that guy and hope they think like Damian does, like CJ did, and like Anthony did. Otherwise, that we don't know. Like, dude, I've said this all along. I put it at 50-50 that Shaden and or Scoot, if one of them becomes star level, could look to bail.
So let me just interrupt for 1 second, because the way that you could do it in a small market, the Blazers were really close, which is draft 2 of them and get them right, or even draft 1.
And that's my point. That's my point.
They had it.
And they had it. Right, and that's my point, though.
And that's where the criticism can come against Neil O'Shea, in my opinion, is because he had the best case scenarios and he couldn't get that last piece. But they were close. Because when you look at the league right now, OKC is a favorite to win the championship. And no one wants to go to OKC per se. And the Spurs were not a place, San Antonio was not a place that was higher on the realm of where players wanted to go than Portland.
And that's my point. That's why you have to do it through the draft. That's why for me, you tank when you can tank to get those shots.
Because now, even Cleveland, let's not forget pre-LeBron, Cleveland's a laughingstock. And now they're, they might get bounced by Orlando, but they were the top seed in the East. You know what I mean? And they got Donovan Mitchell, who is a top free agent, and they built around others with the draft.
They traded for him, and he's
no, that's what I mean. They traded for him. You're right.
Yeah, they traded for him.
But then with the understanding that they had to keep him. So right, and the Blazers can do that. I'm just saying, there's ways. It's not impossible. You just have to do it the right way. And they were close with LaMarcus and Lillard. And if Oden, I hate bringing it back, but if Greg Oden doesn't end up being a complete and total, injury mistake, they were going to be close. You know what I mean? Like, and they would have gotten a 4th player. And even with LaMarcus, CJ, and Lillard, I did not believe that they couldn't get another one through free agency. I did not. I think that was a mistake for O'Shea to continue to use excuses, because I looked at other places that were able to do that and final pieces. But it's hard. And the Blazers are not there. They don't even have one piece. And I mean, they don't.
Denny, your boy Denny.
Look, and I love it. I love it, but he's not there yet. He could be next year, like with, high hopes if he takes it to another level. But yes, and you got 11th. And I would say, to the response of not blaming them for, trying to be competitive, my response to that is, the game. You got to play it.
Right.
And you didn't. You played it differently, and it didn't work out. Look, it could have worked out. The Mavs got the dang top pick. The Spurs got the second pick. True. Like, I mean, it could have worked out. I mean, but it didn't. But that's just luck. That's the problem, is when you're playing it out for luck, but you want to give yourself the best odds. But look, the Blazers could have tanked all the way, and that's what I was saying, and being where the Wizards were, and it ended up sixth. So it's just frustrating to see the Spurs, and I'm going with them because they were the closest too. Like, they wouldn't have had to tank hard to be worse than the Spurs. It was 3 games. You see what I'm saying? Like, they still could have done the 9-10 or 10-11 and done that, and they would have landed there. But again, I'm basing it on ping pong balls and luck, which is not the best way to, it sadly is the easiest way to go from, the outhouse to the penthouse. It's the easiest way. But it's filled with luck and not with what you do.
Right.
Bottom line, look, yesterday, bad day. Today, good day. That's what I'm going. That's what we should. That's where we should settle.
Right. So without high picks and good drafts, you have to hit on guys that aren't obvious, right? The Donovan Mitchells and the Bam Adebayos and Giannis's of the world, and it happens all the time. Kawhi's. Drexler was what? Was Drexler like the 14th pick or something like that?
No,
I can't
remember. Jokic.
He had to be.
Draymond Green's a 2nd-round pick. Klay Thompson's lower in the draft. I mean, we can, and you can't miss.
There's a path. But it's tough.
And getting Chris Murray's at 23 is not the path.
Clyde had to be higher. Clyde was 14th. Yeah, his 14th pick, right? So, that's one path. The other way is you pull off trades for players that end up blossoming. Like, one of the biggest things the Bucks did, besides draft Giannis, was trade for Middleton. Middleton was averaging 6 points per game for whomever he was playing with before.
I covered Chris Middleton in high school. Let me tell you something. Chris Middleton went to Porter Goud in Charleston, South Carolina. You want to talk about playing at a lower level of basketball? I mean, it's shocking that he ended up being he was great. He was great. But we're talking about real small level South Carolina basketball, and he ended up being an all-star for a brief period of time and a piece that you needed to win a championship.
Right. Rasheed Wallace was someone who was a high pick, 4th pick, played 1 year in Washington. Blazers went out and got him. He became an all-star. So there's pathways. I'm not saying there aren't, but
Zach Randolph.
Right. But again, none of these people won championships in Portland, of course. But anyway, my point is, when you have the opportunity to get high into a draft, and you know how tough it is to pull off these things we're talking about in terms of drafting the Drexlers of the world at 14. You know how hard it is to pull off some kind of marquee trade. You know how hard it is to get a free agent. Man, the best way to do it is in the draft. So I still don't understand it. But whatever. It's over, said and done. So do you have any idea who you think the Blazers should take on the draft? Or do you?
You look at it, and I look at 3 different mock drafts, and they're all different. And the funny part about it is, because of where the Blazers are with their roster and no givens per se, you got one got to go a guard, another one got to go forward. The one luxury they have is right now there should be no question that they just take best player available, which should always be. But there's no, if it's a point guard, sorry, you got to take a point guard. It would suck, but if they were drafting 2, they'd be taking a point guard. Right. So to me, that's the part that was interesting with the Lillard thing, when they were drafting 3 and they drafted the point guard, and it disrupted the whole franchise. No pick. It will disrupt this franchise at this point. It'll just be ad. The question's going to be, there's so much that has to happen first. We know that these first few mocks, the top 2, I think, are locked in. But even after 2, there's a lot of debate of where people are going to be. Some people have the big man from Rutgers at 3. Others have him, dropping out of the top 10. And I think you got to measure them. You got to see them. And again, I did not know Luka Doncic, was going to be what he is. I knew he was going to be a lottery pick, but we don't know about these European players, what they're going to turn into. And, but that's what I hope for. Somebody that just instantly you're like, oh, when you got Damian, you're like, oh, I see why, and it's not like we were all watching Weber State basketball and being like, that's the guy. Everyone who's doing that's a liar. So,
right. All right, cool. We're not going to do our breakdown of the guard position because of the breaking news with the pending sale of it's not pending yet, but the team's on the market now. The Blazers are, but we'll come back with that and we'll make our first dive into the draft in terms of, you got to do some homework, Craig. You
Oh,
got to
yeah.
go out there and look. Give me like 5
Already
names you
looking.
like. All right.
I'm hitting
next time
YouTube
on
to find out how to say the names, man. That's what you got to do.
Yeah, that too. Exactly. Me too.
That's the
All right,
secret,
okay.
people.
We'll bring that and more on the next episode of the Blazer Focus podcast. Thanks for listening.